Permit me to lead the debate on a bill for an act to establish the National Student Financial Aid Scheme and to repeal the Nigerian Education Bank Act, CAP E104, LFN 2004, and for others matters connected therewith, which was read for the first time on Wednesday, the 16th December 2020. Mr. President, my distinguished colleagues, the Nigerian Students' Loans Board was established in 1972 to help students finance undergraduate and graduate studies within and outside of Nigeria. Between 1972 and 1991, the board provided loans totaling 46 million naira to help students finance their education. Out of this disbursed sum, however, the board faced the problem of recovering outstanding loans of over 40 million naira. This, unfortunately, led to the suspension of the scheme in 1992. In 1993, the Student Loans Board was replaced by the Nigerian Education Bank with the following specific functions: students lending, lending for publishing, and provision of advisory services for the educational purposes. Loans to undergraduates under the Education Bank are designed to place a likely debt burden on students for 4 years. Within a specified range, the student loans are assumed to vary according to type of courses taken, duration, level, degree or non-degree courses. Loans are, however, structured to meet the higher costs of students in professional fields such as medicine, law, accountancy, architecture, quantitative survey, and so on. Student loan scheme is not new in most developed countries like the United States of America, the United Kingdom, and Australia. However, the concept of education bank is a novel one. Education bank serves as a major intermediary in education credit market financing. It is designed to harness private sector resources for the funding of education and expected to take over part of education funding responsibility so as to enable government channel its scarce resources to other areas of the economy. The existing structural position. The organizational structure for educational lending is critical to the success of making funds easily accessible for education financing. The Nigeria Education Bank is wholly subscribed banking business venture by the federal government. In administration of its retail commercial banking services, the bank is subject to provisions of Bank and Other Financial Institutions Act as far as it applies to other commercial banks. The loans advanced by the bank are expected at the prevailing commercial interest rates in the country. Though subsidy is envisaged from the federal and state governments, the effect of this is that the bank is to run purely as a business venture with expectation of profit. In an economy with high rate of unemployment, it is hardly possible that such long-term advances could be sustainable and repayment guaranteed. In the end, the laudable objective of making funds available to enable easier access to education will have been defeated. The bill therefore seeks to provide a realistic framework for the success of education financing. It repeals the existing Nigerian Education Bank and establishes a student financial aid scheme. It provides for the management, governance, and administration of the scheme, granting of interest-free loans and bursaries to eligible students at higher institutions, and well-structured administration of such loans and bursaries at their recovery. Unlike the Principal Act, the bill seeks to make the head of the scheme a Director General instead of a Managing Director. The bill exerts the banking function out of the scheme so as to ensure a more functional management of the loans revolving fund for educational purposes. Conclusion. The bill is proposed against the background of experience gained from the administration of the Principal Act. It is the prerogative of the initiative to empower the indigent students with access to higher education. It makes the administration of the scheme simple, effective, and efficient. It also places the country on the right path of subsidizing education. The bill has no financial implication. I therefore urge my distinguished colleagues to support its second reading. Thank you, Mr. President, for the opportunity. And
Distinguished Senator Adiola.
Thank you, Mr. President. Very distinguished colleague, Adiola Solomon Olamileko. Mr. President, distinguished colleague, I want to commend the sponsor of this bill. I say this with all sense of responsibility because this is one bill that is long overdue. And I want to say that if this bill should see the light of the day, that is to the extent that the President of the Federal Republic signed it into law, it will be a landmark law that will have been passed by this National Assembly. Mr. President, distinguished colleague, these bills that we are sponsoring or we are looking at today are bills or laws that is established in other developed parts of the world and that is workable. That is, you have students who cannot afford to pay for their university, having access to funds through this student loan scheme. And I strongly believe that for the first time, I am aware that there was one in the past they called the Nigerian Educational Bank. If this is what this bill will have been looking at, I will have come up to say we don't need any new bank now. But for this National Student Financial and Scheme Establishment Bill that we are looking at today, I want to commend the sponsor and say that the only area which I want us to look into critically is a realistic framework, that is for the bill to be able to work and function as it's expected. Mr. President, distinguished colleagues, this loan, if given to these students, it is expected that it will only be repaid back if the students have a gainful employment. And this is one area we should also look at. That is why we are talking about a realistic framework, a workable framework that will not in any way be an hindrance to the implementation of this particular scheme if eventually passed into law. So if we can get the realistic framework in place and the workable one, I believe that it will be a right step in the right direction if we have a National Student Financial and Scheme Establishment Bill. As this bill will address a lot of shortages and students who are willing to further their education, but due to lack of funds, they cannot. But with this bill being passed by this National Assembly and signed into law, you will have more of our students who cannot afford to go to school accessing this kind of fund so that they can complete their educational programs. So I welcome it and I support it wholeheartedly, and I want to call on my colleagues to also join and to support, and so we ensure that this bill is eventually passed into law. I so submit, Mr. President.
Thank you very much.
Right of every human being, and particularly for our country as a developing country, tertiary education is still critical for us. Yes, we do have growing population, but we still have large number of our citizens who are unable to afford tertiary education because of lack of resources. Several of us have established various scholarship schemes supporting students, but this is not enough. Particularly, Mr. President, for postgraduate education, many students do have challenge for them to be able to pursue master's and PhD degrees because of lack of funding. So in view of this, Mr. President, this bill, this legislative proposal is very important to come on board to strengthen the quality of our education and make it easy, particularly for the indigent and poor students, in the country to be able to attract funding, and for lack of fund not to be a limitation for them to be able to attain their God-given ability and talent. Mr. President, one of the other things that we need to look at while we are looking at this bill should be the issue of tailoring our education to potential employment. Because in countries that are developed, where student loans are granted, usually students are able to pay back because as soon as they graduate or they finish their education, they are able to secure employment through which they are able to pay. It will be very important for educational planner for us to plan education in such a way that students offer courses with potential for them to be able to get jobs, so that when these schemes comes on board, it will be possible for such students to be able to pay. Particularly at postgraduate level, people should be able to only probably engage in studies that will be able to afford them the potential opportunities to be able to get employment. Finally, Mr. President, I think in instituting this kind of scheme also, it will be one of the functions of the government to be able to support Nigerians to deepen our infrastructural development, to deepen our technological growth, because with this kind of scheme, it means there will be more students that can be able to offer particularly specialized courses. I therefore support the proposal and urge my colleagues to allow it to go for second reading. Thank you, Mr. President.
Distinguished Senator Frank Ibezim, Imo North.
Student loans have been what has driven economies all over the world. So I join my voice and I ask distinguished senators to please all support this bill. Thank you very much.
A bill for an act to establish the National Student Financial Aid Scheme to provide for the granting of loans to eligible students at higher institutions and repeal the provisions of the Nigerian Education Bank Act, CAB N104, Laws of the Federation of Nigeria 2004, and for other matters connected therewith 2022, second reading taken. And the bill is referred to the Committee on Tertiary Education and Third Fund for further legislative action to report back within 4 weeks. Leader of the Senate.